Hello, internet friends. My name is Catherine, and I'm the human behind Creation Bisculture. And today is another Color Wheel Monday, and we are very excited because we're adding a yellow into our blue. So, what we've done so far, we've complete the red portion of the color wheel. We're working our way through the color wheel, starting with the triangle of our primary colors. So now we're onto the blues, and today we're adding a yellow. So we're going to try to create a secondary color in this case. So it's going to be very interesting to see what we get with our primary colors. So we're working with Caribbean Blue, and we're working with Brilliant Yellow from Dharma Trading Co. And we are also working with Nitpig Fingering Stroll Weight in 10-gram mini skeins. So if you are interested to find anything, there in the description box below, you will find, ouch, Zoe, you will find affiliated link for the Nitpick Fingering Stroll. There will be also a link for Dharma Trading Co. However, it's not an affiliated link. And there will be links for everything else used in this video. So without further ado, let's get into this. Welcome back to another episode of Color Wheel Monday. And so we've completed the red section of this series. Now we're on to the blues. And last week we added the red into the blue, and today we're going to be adding yellow into blue. So we already know from experience with the red that our brilliant yellow is not a color that will shine a whole lot when it's to incorporate into another color, and so we already know that it's going to like washed out a lot in the color, but it's the question is how much it will wash out. So it will most likely turn the blue into a green for the darker depth of shades of the yellow. However, how much is the question. So we're going to be making a 1% stock solution of the yellow. I'm going to be grabbing my respirator. Okay, so I will sound muffled, but it is okay. Let's make 1% stock solution. So 1% stock solution is 1 gram of dry powder in 100 milliliters of water. So let's do this. There we go. 1 gram of brilliant yellow. So we want to try to dissolve as much as we can with a tiny bit, and so almost to create a paste. And then after that, we'll be adding a little bit more and up to 100 milliliters. Okay. So now that we have, ouch. Now that the powder is wet and it's no longer a volatile risk, I'm removing my respirator and we can finish to mix it up. And I still have leftover diced stock solution from the Caribbean Blue, so I won't need to make more. But I needed yellow, so here we are. So we will have our brilliant yellow here and the Caribbean Blue here. So now we're going to be grabbing the mason jars. And since we're using the Caribbean Blue as our main color for this section of the series, we're going to be doing 1% depth of shade for each of the mini skeins. Since they're 10-gram fingering weight from Nitpick, we will need 10 milliliters of our 1% stock solution that we've made for this. And after that, we're going to be adding in increment the yellow to see the impact of the color, how little or how much more you need to create the colors that you want. So we're starting with the 0.05% depth of shade of yellow up to 1% depth of shades at the end. But we're going to be adding the blue first. 10 milliliters in each. And voila. So now we're going to be adding our brilliant yellow. So we're going to start by 0.3, 0.5 actually, sorry. Yellow in here, 1 here, 2.5. And you can see that there's a shift in the color. But we know that blue is very potent. So we just need to figure out how potent. 5 milliliters? I can already see greens. It's the shade of greens that I don't know. 7.5. And 10. There we go. So it's also a good idea to do this sort of exercise because if you're doing variegated colors and you have a little bit of yellow, you can have a better understanding of how the yellow will shift the final color. So it's always good to have those information. So let's add the mini skeins now. So the water that is used is tap water at room temperature. Oh, we almost have a turquoise now with the tiny bit of yellow in it. That's very interesting. Okay, yeah. So it's room temperature tap water. There's no acid in it as of right now because when I'm doing tonals, I like to add my citric acid later in the process so that way the color can penetrate properly into the yarn. Hmm, I feel like we're more on the teal side of thing. If we were to add a tiny bit of black to this specific one, we would have more of a teal color, which is nice. This is a good information to have, especially if you don't want to purchase too many pre-mixed colors. So you could technically create your own mixes and just like play with it. So this is why it's also fun to play with primary colors when you first start working on it. Yeah, this one is definitely more teal than the rest, and I really like that one actually. So this is the one with 2.5 0.25% depth of shade of the yellow. Hmm, that's cool. I love that. That's very nice. Okay, carry on. Sorry. And I feel like we're going to get into more greens. So I like how we actually have a color shift in this case. So brilliant yellow might be more potent than I thought it was because we are actually getting closer to a green Kelly the more yellow we have, or emerald green almost. Hmm. It's very fascinating. I love that. And like I know I sound surprised, okay, but in theory I understand color theory. However, in practice, it's always nice to see the shift happen. I don't know if it makes sense because theory and practice is two different things. Okay, this is cool. I can't wait to compare to when we're going to be adding blue to yellow. Like when we're going to be comparing that is going to be very interesting because that's also my goal with working the way we are is to be able to compare with each other's. So that's pretty cool. Last but not least. Yeah, and here we actually have a green. Hmm. But we still needed 1% depth of shade of the brilliant yellow to obtain this color. But that's fine. That's part of the joy of working this. Okay, so like I said, it's tap water that we've used. There's no citric acid. We'll be adding the citric acid later on when it's in the double boiler. So let's add this to the double boiler. Okie dokie. Let's add those. Hello, here is editing Catherine. I don't know what happened. The sound is horrible and it was slowed down, so I tried to work with it. So, yeah, so we are missing a portion of this portion. Sorry about that. Between 85 Celsius to 95 Celsius. Once it's reached that temperature, we are going to let it cook for half an hour. So I will talk to you in maybe 15 minutes. Okie dokie. So we are going to be adding our citric acid because it's been roughly 30 minutes, and not 30 minutes, like closer to 15-20 minutes since we added the colors, and this has been on the stove. Ooh, this is going to be a lively. Oh, I really like that color. Like, I feel like we could create such a nice aqua and a teal. Okay, so for the citric acid, we're not even adding like the full half teaspoon because this is a half teaspoon here. We're not adding the entire thing because we don't need that much. Ooh. Oh, this one is fun. Oh, I bet if we were to add a little bit of black in it, it would make such a fun color. Oh, yay. That's very pretty. Okay, sorry. I get distracted a little too easily sometimes. Oh, we almost have a green Kelly here. So I feel like we're going to get the green Kelly out of this. At least out of one of them. Or maybe emerald green. Yeah, it's starting to be very emerald green. Love it. It's very important to understand how the primary colors work together so you can work with that a lot better. I must have inhaled some citric acid because ugh. Okay, so we just added the citric acid in it. We're not exactly at the right temperature yet. So we need it to be between 85 Celsius to 95 Celsius before we can turn on the timer for 30 minutes. Once we reach the right temperature, I'll put a timer for 30 minutes. And after that, we're going to come back and see where we're at and if we need to either adjust the pH or just a tiny bit longer on the stove. But it should never be longer than 45 minutes because if you're going longer than 45 minutes, you risk to compromise your yarn. So we're going to let this for probably 30 minutes. I will come back to see if we've reached the right temperature because it takes longer when you have more water. So see you in a bit. Okay. I really like those colors. It's crazy how it did change, but it didn't change that much. Very interesting. And you can see that like all the yellow has already struck the yarn and it's only blue that we have left in the water. And I'm not super worried about that because it's blue and that's what usually happens. Blues have a tendency to need the cool off period to fully clear the dye bath. So we can turn it off now and we're going to let it cool completely before we will wash it. So see you in a bit. Okay, so with the Caribbean Blue, like we saw last week, we know that we will have some bleeding, so we'll have a little bit more work to do to make sure that we like don't have any more bleeding at the end and that all the excess dye is gone and that we don't have to worry about that in the future when we're working with it to knit and or crochet, whichever you prefer, or like even weaving, so we don't have like colors on our fingers, which is always very disappointing when it happens, but you know, sometimes it happens. I did had quite a bit more of a leftover in the dye bath for this one. I'm not quite sure because I double checked my pH level and it was right. And I might have not reached the right temperature. Usually I'm fine with reaching my 85 to 95 Celsius when it comes down to this, but maybe I just didn't let it cook long enough. But I've put it back on the stove just because I wasn't sure if it was. This is something that you can always do. So if you fear that your color is not like it's bleeding more than usual, what you can always do is either steam block it or put it back in water with citric acid and go and do a second round of cooking it. So you would do basically the same as usual, and you would once you reach your 85 to 95 Celsius, you would let it cook for half an hour. If it has a time to cool down before you do that, you should be fine felting wise, and you shouldn't be compromising the integrity of your fiber. So it's definitely something that you can consider doing. However, this is not always the all fix it all thing. Sometimes it's just due to the nature of the percentage of depth, the depth of shade that you've chosen to work with. So it's not always because you didn't dye it properly or bond it properly. It's sometimes just the more dye powder you're using, the more chances you have to have some bleeding. So now that we are pretty much almost done cleaning up, what we're going to do is we're going to put it in a spin dryer so that way we remove all excess water and let it dry out overnight. And after that, I will show you the mason jars to show you that we did have some color left in the jars, but it was a little bit more than what I was hoping for. And here they are, and after that we shall see the color. And here's the final result for adding yellow to our Caribbean Blue. Honestly, I'm slightly surprised to see that we actually got greens. I was expecting, yes, I was expecting greens, but I was expecting to have darker shades of green. I don't know why. I think I don't know why. Maybe because the Caribbean Blue is a cool tone color. Maybe I shouldn't have been expecting something darker because that yellow is more on the cool side too compared to others, even though it's still like a warm one. It's like it's not neutral, but so I found it very interesting to see that like it was a little bit more potent. I think that's what it's happening. So I was not expecting the yellow to take well, but apparently it's playing really nice with the blue. um I think, okay, I understand where my confusion came from, because when we added the yellow to the red, we didn't get like super orange colors. We still have very red colors with a tint of warmth in it. So this is why I got slightly confused. So I think that the brilliant yellow just played nicer with Caribbean Blue, and this is where my confusion comes from. Yeah, this is exactly what it is. But we have very cute colors. So we almost have like a teal aqua here. So I feel like if we were to play with this color, like if we wanted to actually have an aqua color, if we tone down the blue, and I don't know, we would have to play with the yellow and see what can be done. Like honestly, once we're done color wheel week in Monday, I think we're going to play with colors a little bit more to see the interactions between concentration and potency and all of that, because I'm very curious to see how we're going to be working with this. um, so yeah, so I understand where my confusion comes from now. So the brilliant yellow plays more nicely with the Caribbean Blue. Hmm. So that's just that's good. If you've liked the video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye!